You signed that letter along with Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Hank Johnson, I think the principal author of it, and a few other members of the House. It seems very clear, as strong a case of recusal as one could imagine.
Well, and it is a strong case. It's even stronger because Clarence Thomas has already recused himself from a January 6th case. You'll remember there was an uproar when it came out about his wife's role in the January 6th case and the fact that he had not recused himself from an earlier Supreme Court case related to turning over text messages from Mark Meadows, I believe, to the January 6th committee. After that uproar, after it was revealed the extent of which his wife was involved, he then did recuse himself in a case that went up to the court about John Eastman's communications related to January 6th. So it's not only that this is an open and shut case of an appearance of a conflict of interest, if not an actual conflict of interest, but it is precedent that he has set himself. And so if he now does not recuse from this case, he will clearly be picking and choosing which cases related to January 6th he wants to rule on and which he doesn't think are sufficiently important for him to insist on ruling upon. And it just underscores how important it is for the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court does not do it, for Congress itself to implement new ethics rules on the Supreme Court so that it is not just up to Clarence Thomas to make this decision himself.
I want to turn to your other labors of the day on the Oversight Committee. You, on the Democrats on the committee, issued a report today titled White House for Sale: How Princes, Prime Ministers, and Premiers Paid Off President Trump. There's been a lot of reporting on this today, China being the biggest payer of Donald Trump while he was in the presidency, over $5 million. And as I understand this report, this covers only 2 years of the Trump presidency?
That's right, Lawrence. But finally, after a full year, the Oversight Committee of the House of Representatives has discovered corruption of foreign influence peddling by a president of the United States. It's been a year-long investigation. What the Republicans just haven't realized is that it's not Joe Biden. It was Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who received over nearly $8 million in, yes, just the first 2 years of his 4-year presidency from 20 foreign countries, including the most from China, while he was in office, while he was making executive decisions. He was taking money from foreign governments. That's a violation of the Emoluments Clause. But you know who doesn't violate the Emoluments Clause by investing in foreign companies and making money? Hunter Biden, a private citizen who just happens to be President Biden's son, but whose business has had nothing to do with President Biden. So I hope my Republican colleagues will recognize that their investigation should really be into President Trump for foreign corruption, not President Biden, who received no money from foreign governments.
Let's listen to Sean Hannity just about 3 weeks ago, obsessing over Hunter Biden when he said this on his radio show.
I cannot for the life of me, imagine what the media and how the country and the left in this country would be reacting if Donald Trump and the Trump organization and the Trump family were making tens of millions of dollars from our top geopolitical foes like China and Russia.
There it is, Congressman Goldman. That's from the people obsessing over Hunter Biden.
Right. And this is such a critical distinction is Hunter Biden was a private citizen. He was an investor. He was on a board of a foreign company. You get paid if you're on the board. You can make capital investments in foreign companies. It's called private equity. And when you hear Chairman James Comer say, oh, well, Donald Trump was selling something and Hunter Biden wasn't buying or selling anything, Well, just look at Chairman Comer's finances. He claims to be the biggest landowner and in real estate developer. Well, that's owning land. That is not selling a widget. So the idea that you would invest in land in order to recoup a profit is no different than if you were to invest in a foreign company of any sort to provide them with capital that they need in order to make money. So this fictional distinction that the Republicans are trying to draw between Donald Trump's hotels and Hunter Biden's investments falls on its head. And that's even if you get past the fact that Hunter Biden never worked in the White House, much less was president of the United States.
Yeah, and the Hunter Biden money we're talking about here that they've turned up is a tiny fraction of the Trump money that you found just in those 2 years of the Trump presidency.
It's the amount of money, I think, should not guide us here because the money could be a lot, it could be a little. It's the conduct. It is the conduct. And it is the fact that Donald Trump was happily accepting money from foreign countries, including adversaries like China, like Saudi Arabia, who we have a very tense relationship with. And you'll remember how he did nothing about the Jamal Khashoggi murder while he was in office against Saudi Arabia, did absolutely nothing to condemn them or, God forbid, put any restrictions or sanctions on them. No, instead, he was happily trying to generate more profits from them. And as he has said even before, as he was running, oh, I make $40 or $50 million off of apartments from the Saudis. Why would I be against them? This is who Donald Trump was. He was corrupt to the core. He remains corrupt to the core. And the Republicans are trying to use their own projection of what Donald Trump's misconduct and inappropriate business relationships were and trying to project it onto President Biden, because if Trump did it, then that must mean everybody did it. That is the theory. And of course, it is bogus.
Congressman Dan Goldman, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.